Right now, deep inside your brain, your substantia nigra is degenerating, and the neurologists who built their careers studying it admit they cannot stop it, not slow it, not reverse it. The cell death has already started. It started years ago. You have lost dopamine-producing neurons you will never get back. And the worst part, you cannot feel it happening. The substantia nigra is your brain's dopamine factory. A dark crescent of tissue just millimeters across, buried in the midbrain, responsible for far more than mood. It controls movement, motivation, the felt sense that effort is worth making. When it fires correctly, you get out of bed, you begin things, you follow through. When it quietly degrades, everything becomes harder in ways you cannot name. You call it laziness, you call it age. You blame your sleep, your diet, your discipline. But underneath every one of those explanations, something structural is shifting. The researchers who study this disease have a name for the tipping point where loss finally becomes visible. They call it the 70% threshold. You lose 70% of those neurons before a single symptom appears, before the first tremor, before any diagnosis. Most of the damage is done in silence, years before you suspect anything is wrong. Here is what's happening inside that tissue right now. Your substantia nigra neurons are surrounded by misfolded protein clusters called Lewy bodies, sticky, toxic aggregates that accumulate like sediment inside the cell's machinery. They clog the neuron's internal transport system. Mitochondria, the cell's power source, stop generating energy cleanly. The neuron runs hot and slow at once, like a processor with no cooling. And because these neurons produce dopamine, the shortfall spreads outward. Your prefrontal cortex loses its chemical signal. Decision-making goes foggy. Your reward circuitry goes quiet. Tasks that once felt manageable start feeling pointless, not because something is wrong with your character, but because the chemical that marks effort as worthwhile is simply not arriving. We're getting to how to interrupt this. But first you need to understand why the people who study this problem cannot fix it. Because what they're working against is not just biology, it is timing. By the time the damage becomes visible on any scan, it is already catastrophic. The neurologists who mapped this mechanism do not hide their frustration. The problem is detection. There is no blood test, no scan, no clinical marker that shows early substantia nigra degeneration before symptoms emerge. Imaging tools only register the deficit after the 70% threshold is crossed. The dopamine replacement drugs that get prescribed manage what remains. They do not protect what exists. And here is the part that doesn't get published in any coverage you see. The researchers studying this know the intervention window exists. It opens early when the cells are still firing, when the degradation is subtle. They simply have no pharmaceutical tool to open it for you. What they have identified is a set of upstream behavioral conditions, modifiable, learnable, that either accelerate the cell death or meaningfully slow it. And this is where everything you've been told gets it backwards. The standard advice, meditate more, calm the nervous system, reduce stress, misses the mechanism entirely. Passive mindfulness, practiced without targeted intention, has been shown in some populations to reduce the very motor cortex activation that keeps dopaminergic pathways primed and defended. You can calm yourself into a lower dopamine baseline. Stillness, taken too far, mimics the inactivity that accelerates the decline. The goal is not calm. The goal is specific, deliberate activation, the kind that recruits the dopamine pathway not to seek a reward, but to defend the hardware that produces it. Here is the rule that nobody publishes. What appears consistently across the motor neuroscience literature, not in wellness content, not in longevity influencer culture, is that the substantia nigra responds to one very specific stimulus, complex, novel motor learning. Not cardio, not passive walking, not stretching. Learning that forces your brain to build entirely new motor maps in real time. An instrument, a martial art, a sport with unpredictable trajectories. Juggling appears in multiple independent studies because it demands both hands to track separate arcs simultaneously, firing dopaminergic circuits with unusual intensity. The mechanism is direct. Novel motor learning requires dopamine to signal that a new pattern is worth encoding. That demand prompts production. Production keeps the cells active. And active cells, cells under sustained, specific recruitment, do not degrade at the same rate as neurons that go quiet and unused. High performers who preserve fluid movement and sharp cognition into late age share one habit nobody credits. They never stopped learning something physically new, not for fitness, for cellular survival. Tonight, pick one movement your hands have never learned, not a workout, a skill. 5 minutes both hands, a pattern your motor cortex has not encoded. Do it daily. The moment it becomes comfortable, switch to something harder because the protection lives entirely in the learning phase, not the mastery. That friction in the first attempt, that is your substantia nigra firing. But the substantia nigra is not working alone. There is another region, deeper in the same reward circuit, running a parallel degradation, and its decline moves faster, starts earlier, and is linked to something you do every single night without knowing you are accelerating it.